Welcome to Radical Personal Finance. My name is Joshua Sheets. It's been 1 week since the assassination of conservative leader Charlie Kirk in the United States. This is an event that has impacted me personally and many of my listeners, and indeed many people in the world very deeply. It's an event that, while tragic, I hope will turn out to be a great turning point in American, even global society. Watching Charlie Kirk, an extremely mild-mannered man, be assassinated in public has certainly helped put a little bit of steel in my spine. I've thought a lot about what I wanted to share with you on the podcast, and I've recorded various things at various times, but what I've decided to share with you today is quite different than what perhaps you might be expecting. And yet it's a lesson that to me seems important and stands out in the context of personal finance discussions and a broader discussion. The question I want you to think about today is this: who will marry your widow and raise your children when you die on the battlefield? If you can answer that question in any way, it may be a name or a list of names, or it may just be a strong conviction that there's a group of men who will make sure that things are taken care of, even if we, of course, don't know what that would look like, then you are well positioned to win in life. And we need to be building more of that. Now, I know that sounds a little unusual, so let me back up for just a moment and lay down a little bit more context for this discussion. I was not deeply involved in the Charlie Kirk universe before his death. I thought back, and I think I've probably consumed 3 hours of his content, maybe 4. I know specifically I consumed a couple of hours of Charlie Kirk's show on election night, 2024, this past year. I enjoy on election night, I enjoy surfing around. And so I went back and forth between the Young Turks on YouTube and Charlie Kirk, and I watched the returns come in, flipping back and forth between those two shows. And I really engaged with Charlie's show and watching him do that on election night. I knew vaguely that he was a guy who was doing stuff in the political space and important, but I didn't have a sense of nearly how important. I'd seen some clips here and there, I guess, but I never had watched his show. But his election night coverage was super engaging because he was really, really into it. He was intense. And I'll skip all the stories, but he was intense. And so it was fascinating to watch him. I was just drawn in by how committed he was and how hard he had been working for this election outcome. I also watched some of his fairly recent debate at the Oxford Student Union, and I thought he did an okay job with it. I didn't think he won several of the comments, but I enjoyed some aspects of the debate. So I probably watched 3 or 4 hours of his stuff before his death. I didn't know a lot about him is the point. When I saw the assassination video and found out that he left behind a wife and children, then of course I started to learn more about him. And the tragedy of the event is primarily related to that of his wife and children. And of course, other tragedies related to our society and the values that we hold as society. And many things that I could say about those things, but I want to stay focused on my major point. Charlie died a good death. He died an honorable death. Dying an honorable death is something that we don't talk as much about in today's world as I wish we did. There are some cultures that have talked about that, but ours is not one. We have tended to somehow think that death is a tragedy, always, and therefore we forget that all of us are going to die. And to me, it is much more important how we die than when we die. None of us get off this earth alive. Every single one of us dies. But not all of us live. And I would much rather attend the funeral of a man who lived an impactful and honorable life and died when he was 31, dying a death of honor, than I would attend the funeral, as I attended a number of years ago, a podcast that I did about it, of a man who was in his 60s, in his late 60s, and who died as an older man but never did anything with his life. That was a personal friend who was a personal friend, but just kind of a guy who just didn't do anything. When a man doesn't do much with his life, and when he dies just because we all die, okay, you can go to the funeral and you can mourn him, but it's much more satisfying when a man dies with honor. So what do I mean by honor? Well, you might die with honor because you have been cut down on the field of battle. Ideally, you're fighting a just war. It might be a physical war. You may be a soldier and you're fighting a just and honorable war, and you are cut down in a hail of gunfire while you are fighting for something that is right and righteous. That's a good death. You may be cut down in battle when you're fighting a metaphorical war, as Charlie was fighting a political campaign, a battle to try to improve the world using the free expression and free debate of ideas, and you're cut down. That's a good death. You might die a good death as an old man who was never involved in a physical war nor a metaphorical war, but you gave your life for your friends. You laid down your life and you raised children and grandchildren. You saw them launched. You were a good neighbor. You were a good friend. You built a business that employed people in your community. I'm not trying to stick just with battlefield imagery, but I'm saying that we want to live an honorable life. And when a man lives an honorable life, whenever he dies and however he dies, we can celebrate him as long as he dies with honor. You know, when do we not celebrate when a man dies? Well, maybe he takes the coward's way out. Right? He ends his own life and he leaves his wife and children to suffer, and he leaves his friends and family to suffer. Well, he's a coward. He doesn't die an honorable death. He dies a shameful death, and we should heap coals of shame upon him because his memory is forever poisoned. Or if a man sacrifices his principles in the last moment, well, he can take an entire life and it's basically destroyed by him sacrificing his principles. So my point is, we need to be thinking about this and talking about deaths of honor. But to me, Charlie Kirk died an honorable death. And just because he's cut down at 31 years old, it feels tragic, but I think it's better. He would prefer to have been cut down at 31 years old and have an honorable death rather than to live a dishonorable life. Now, he could have accomplished much more, but God knows. God knows. The point is, even if somebody dies young, we can appreciate how they went out. I think of the Spartan saying that a Spartan mother would send her son off to war and say, either come back holding your shield or lying on it. Meaning, if you're sent out to do battle, you had better either win the battle, in which case I'll be thrilled to see you coming home victorious holding your shield, or die in battle, in which case I'll be sad, but I'll know at least you died an honorable death. So what is tragic about Charlie Kirk's death? Again, many things. We could talk about cultural tragedy, but what hits me, and I'm sure hits you, is the tragedy for his wife and for his children. As a husband and father, that is why I would prefer not to die on the field of battle. I've certainly thought about it a lot, and watching Charlie's death has filled me with a renewed vigor and a renewed intention to do my duty in this time and place that I'm in. And I ask myself, am I willing to die on the battlefield for what I believe in? And I am willing. But I would be sad for my wife and for my children. And I think if you had asked Charlie a week before his death, would you be willing to die for your beliefs? I bet he would have said yes. Even if he knew the day and the hour and the way. But he would not want it because of his concern for his wife and for his children. That's how I would answer it. I'm willing to die. But for the sake of my wife and children, for whom and to whom I have responsibility, I would prefer to defer it to a future date. So what can we do in that circumstance? Well, as I reflected on it, here is what I hope happens. First of all, I hope that Charlie's wife and children are surrounded by a strong network of friends, love, and support. And when a public figure like this dies, you see some of those things. You see that some people have said his children will always have their expenses covered, their college paid for. I don't know what Charlie's financial planning was or was not. But the lesson from it is that it doesn't matter whether he had life insurance or didn't have life insurance, because he was busy and he was engaged in something, and people are willing to step up and insure him. Let's pretend for a moment that Charlie Kirk never bought a life insurance policy. His wife is still fine. His children are still fine because he made a difference in the world and he had around him a network of people who cared. And there are many people who stand ready, and I am certain many wealthy people who are inquiring and have inquired and will inquire and say, Erica, what do you need? And they will pull out their checkbooks and they will write large checks because of how Charlie lived. And the lesson here is that if you live in a certain way that is honorable and community-oriented, you can dispense with the entire financial marketplace. And that's what stands out to me about this example. For years, I've thought about this difference between the financial markets and the non-financial markets. And I'm grateful for the inventions of the modern world. I'm grateful for life insurance and bank accounts and investment accounts and all of these things. I'm grateful for the functions and the systems we have of credit reports and credit scores and all of that stuff. But in reality, all of these things are ways that we're trying to figure out how to solve the needs of life that historically have been met by community. And that's good. I have life insurance. I want you to have life insurance. But what I really want us to have is I want us to have community. And if you think about Charlie and his death, and you think about it in the context of community, I think you can see how it should be, at least how I desire it to be. I would like to live a life so that I knew that if I died and I did not have the ability to take care of my wife and children, I would like to be part of a community where the men of that community would step forward naturally and obviously and say, of course we'll take care of it. Joshua, your wife, your children, they're covered. I'd like to see the expenses handled. More than the expenses, I'd like to see the people taken care of. I hope that in the years to come, Erica, Charlie's widow, I hope that she finds another man that she's able to build love with and marry. And I hope that that man will step in and will adopt Charlie's children and raise them out of honor for his friend. Hopefully it's a friend, or maybe it's someone new. I don't know, and it's none of my business. But if I were dead, if I were cut down, that's what I would want to be done for me. I would want one of my friends to come and marry my wife and raise my children so that though the tragedy not disappear, the effects of the tragedy in the lives of the people are improved. And the only way that happens is in the context of community. I think some communities get this, and usually it's going to be in a warrior community of some kind. You go to war as a soldier, one of your squad or platoon or one of your mates is cut down in battle, and the other men make the commitment to say, we'll be there. And every year, Christmas presents show up for your children. Every year, these things show up. But in our modern world, it seems like that doesn't happen as much as it should. And yet, I want to live in that part of that kind of community. I want to be that kind of community member. And that's a lesson I've thought a lot about. I'd like for you to think about it as well. I want you to think about your community and imagine that your friend, your brother, some fellow community member dies. Are you prepared to do what needs to be done? Now, of course, let's say that your friend's wife, your friend dies. You're married, you have your own children. You're obviously not going to marry his wife, but are you prepared to take care of her? Are you prepared to provide for her? Are you prepared to provide for her children? Are you out looking and saying, let's find a good man, and you help her connect with a good man who's able to marry her, able to support her, able to keep her free of work for a time? These are the kinds of communities that we need to build. These are the communities that we need to be part of. I think that if we can focus on this and we can continue to do our part to be in community with like-minded people, to live in community with like-minded people, to be committed to the community to the point where it costs us, then it's much more likely that we'll be able to live with honor. Because we're confident that in the end, if we go down in battle, everything's taken care of. I've been considering that this last week. Am I willing to open my mouth? Am I willing to stand tall? Am I willing to fight for what I believe is right? Am I willing to press forward and pick up the torch that Charlie dropped and press forward and do it knowing that it might cost me my life? My willingness to do that is going to be based in large part upon my community. If I know that there are 3 or a dozen or 30 or more men who, if I go down in battle, will see to it that what needs to be done gets done, I'm going to be much more likely to do that. Now, I'm using big words. I'm using big commitments. But I don't think it's going to begin there for most of us. What I mean is, I don't think that we go from 0 to, well, yes, actually, let me marry your widow and raise your children and send them to college. Like, that's not what we're talking about. But perhaps we can start smaller than that. In the New Testament, Paul writes in the book of Galatians, it says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. And what I think you and I can do, if this resonates with you, is we can start to be burden bearers and problem solvers. Many people run from responsibility. They run from problems. They run from burdens. And thus they miss out on community. But if you'll just take your life and you'll look around and you'll say, what needs to be done? And you'll take responsibility for doing what needs to be done, that will start a process of transformation within you today in a humble way, which 10 years from now may result in your having absolute certainty and confidence that if you go down in battle, there's 10 men ready to step up and bear your burdens that you can't fulfill. I saw a video last week that had really, really impacted me before Charlie's death. I saw a video online of an Italian man who was going out at night with a hoodie on to conceal his identity, with a bucket of paint and a paintbrush, a roller. But what he was doing was painting over walls that were covered with graffiti. So instead of being somebody who is destroying a neighborhood by painting graffiti on the walls, he was restoring the neighborhood by painting over the graffiti and bringing back the simple, elegant beauty of the building. And he would leave a note that said, "This is an act of urban love." This video was so beautiful. From what I've described, you can imagine it. Just imagine a block in your city or a building in your city that's covered with graffiti. Or it just has a little bit, just has graffiti, which just destroys the whole thing. And imagine that you go out and you spend $10 on a bucket of paint and you slip out in the night and you get out your paint roller and you clean that building up. What a blessing that is to your neighbors. It's a simple thing that any of us could do. I've never thought of doing that until I saw that video. Never even thought of it. I've driven past graffiti walls and thought to myself, this graffiti looks ugly and it's kind of gross, but I've never thought of going and getting a paint bucket of my own accord and sneaking out in the night and cleaning it up. What would our world be like if you and I did more of that? What would our neighborhoods be like if we just started solving problems? What would our communities be like if we stopped asking for permission and we just started fixing things? I've been involved in pretty good, close communities most of my life. Never been all that lonely. I've tended to be a pretty decent social catalyst. But you know what? There have been many times in my life where the social niceties have held me back. Well, I'm not so sure if I should do this thing to go and help this person because let me just ask and see. I don't want to do that in the future. I just want to be a problem solver. I want to be the man who sees a man with a burden, sees a woman in need, and just goes and does it. And I want to be someone who sows that into the world. I may not be able to shoulder the burden of another man's family when he goes down on battle at this phase of my life. But I am certain that if I will take the actions today to shoulder some small burdens and some small responsibilities, 20 years from now, I'll be the kind of person who could take on the burden of my brother's wife and children when he goes down on the field of battle. I think I'll stop there because I've said what I want to say. There's certainly more that could be said. Perhaps there's more that will be said. But if you are like me and you're considering the circumstances of life and reflecting on them, I hope that this perspective may encourage you. If you are not part of that kind of community, go be a part of it. Go do it. Go join a church. Go join a Bible study. Go form a group and start bearing one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. If you will be the catalyst who goes out and just starts doing it, then you will build that kind of community around yourself. This is my answer to you when you say, how do I find community? You don't. You build it. You've got to go out and build it. And you do it by giving, expecting nothing in return, loving others, serving others, finding a need and solving it. And it may be as simple as the trash in the front yard, the graffiti on the wall, the broken down fence, the family that needs some babysitting so they can take a date night out. Get rid of your reserves, get rid of your selfish attitude, and be one who pours your life out for others. And you'll build for yourself the kind of community where you can know with absolute certainty that if you go down on the battlefield of life, you will die an honorable death. And the tragedy that would otherwise occur of your children growing up without a father and your wife being bereaved for the rest of her life will be avoided, because as you go down, another honorable man will step up and will be the father that your children need and the husband that your wife can count on, and will carry the torch forward. And if he goes down, another will step up, and if he goes down, another will step up. And that kind of thing has power, because that is what you and I want to be involved in. That is what you and I want to build and what we want to be involved in. Death is, in some cases, a tragedy. In this case, this particular death will only be a tragedy if you and I do not learn from it and take action because of it. It is appointed unto man once to die, and you will die, and I will die. And whether you or I die at 31 or 51 or 101, compared to the age of the universe, the age of our cultures, etc., is relatively immaterial in the long run. Death is only sometimes a tragedy. But if you will be the man, and I will be the man, who is living an honorable life, then at our death, our family will grieve and mourn, but they will take satisfaction in how we lived and how we died. And those same men and women will step up and will avert all of the ensuing potential tragic consequences that would otherwise occur from our death, because of how we lived and how we died, and because of the community that we were involved in. Guess what I'm trying to say is a life insurance policy doesn't avert the tragedy that can come from a death. If a father leaves young children behind and a life insurance policy, those children may have some money, but the tragic consequences of the death may still work out in their lives. But if the father dies and has a community, the community can fix those tragic consequences in a way that I think nothing else can. I hope you'll consider that in the days to come. Be back with you soon.